He walked into the clinic just to sell his blood for $100. But when the nurse saw his name, her hands froze, and her face went white. He slid his arm across the counter, veins ready for a $100 plasma draw, but when the nurse saw his name, her face went white as the walls behind her. Have you ever been punished for something you didn't do? Drop your thoughts below. This story might just change how you see love and forgiveness. If this story resonated with you, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because, tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as crazy as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The rain in Seattle never really stopped, it only changed moods. Sometimes it whispered like regret, sometimes it fell like punishment. Ethan Cole didn't care which it was today. He stood in the alley behind a pawn shop, counting out crumpled bills, $27.40, his entire fortune. A man who once signed six-figure contracts now bargained with hunger. He stuffed the bills into his pocket, zipped up his worn leather jacket, and walked toward the neon glow of the downtown plasma center. Its sign flickered, "Give life, get paid," like a cruel joke. Have you ever had everything fall apart so fast you didn't recognize yourself in the mirror? Tell me what kept you going. Inside, the air smelled of bleach and exhaustion. People filled the waiting area, single moms, college students, the invisible backbone of the city. Ethan took a number and sat, avoiding his reflection in the plexiglass. He remembered how his ex-wife, Vivian, used to hate fluorescent lighting. "It makes everyone look poor," she'd said once, half laughing, half meaning it. She'd taken everything, the company, the mansion, even the dog. Legally, it had been hers to begin with. Emotionally, she'd left him with debts no court could measure. Now, he was just Ethan Cole, patient number 72. Meanwhile, across the clinic floor, Clara Hayes adjusted her mask and gloves. Her shift had started at dawn. She was running on caffeine and determination. She greeted patients with warmth, though her eyes betrayed fatigue. When she saw the next chart flash across her monitor, Ethan Cole, age 36, her fingers froze mid-air. Her throat tightened. That name. No. It couldn't be that Ethan Cole. She glanced up. The man in the waiting area, tall, unshaven, eyes hollow but intelligent, looked nothing like the photo she remembered from the corporate database 2 years ago. But it was him. The man her former employer had destroyed. Her pulse raced as she walked toward him, clipboard trembling slightly in her grip. "Mr. Cole," she said, keeping her voice professional. He looked up, polite smile half-formed. "Yeah. That's me." Something in his tone, humble, weary, still proud, twisted something inside her. She led him into the donor room, struggling to steady her hands. When she entered his name into the system, a red banner flashed across her screen. "Confidential. Do not process. Contact admin." Her breath caught. She pressed her palm to her chest, feeling her heartbeat hammer beneath her scrubs. Ethan noticed. "You okay?" Clara forced a smile. "Yeah, just, long shift." He laughed quietly. "You and me both." She hesitated, then rolled up his sleeve. His arm was lean, the veins prominent. He looked away as she prepped the needle. "Ever done this before?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Yeah. Couple times." "Pays the grocery bill." Something inside her broke at his honesty. This man, once worth millions, was now selling blood for bread. As the machine hummed, they sat in silence. Only the rhythmic beeping filled the space. Ethan glanced around the room. "Funny, huh? You think you've lost everything, then you realize you still have something left to give." Clara swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. She didn't know whether to cry or tell him the truth, that she knew exactly who had taken everything from him, and why. But for now, she said nothing. She simply whispered, you're doing something good, Mr. Cole. Maybe more than you know. He smiled faintly. Guess we'll see. The beeping continued. Outside, the rain softened, like the world itself was holding its breath. The plasma machine whirred steadily, a quiet metronome to the storm outside. The clinic windows were fogged from the warmth inside, the rain streaking them like tears on glass. Clara's gloves squeaked softly as she adjusted the tubing. She could feel her pulse in her wrists. Why him? Of all the hundreds of donors, why today? Her eyes flicked to the monitor again, that red warning box still glaring, confidential. Do not process. She minimized it quickly before he could notice. Everything all right? Ethan asked, noticing her hesitation. His voice was calm, but wary. She nodded, forcing a small smile. Yeah. The system's just slow. He chuckled softly. Story of my life. That easy humor, cracked, but still shining through hardship, hit her deeper than she expected. For a moment, silence stretched between them. It wasn't uncomfortable, exactly. It was heavy, alive. Ethan's gaze drifted to the ceiling tiles. You ever feel like the world's playing some kind of private joke on you? Clara tilted her head, intrigued. What do you mean? He gave a dry laugh. I built a company that designed automated systems to eliminate human error. Guess who the system eliminated first? Her heart squeezed. She knew exactly what he meant, and worse, she knew the real story. Vivian Cole hadn't just divorced him. She had used insider leaks, false misconduct reports, and a PR campaign to destroy his credibility so she could seize full ownership. Clara had watched it unfold from inside the company's medical division. She'd seen how the machine chewed up good people to protect its queen. She had wanted to reach out back then, to tell him the truth. But she hadn't. Fear and loyalty had chained her silence. And now here he was, veins feeding a machine for survival. Her throat felt tight. That sounds unfair. He smiled, faint and bitter. Fair's for storybooks. He looked down at his arm where the needle rested. Now I get to feel useful again, even if it's just a pint at a time. Clara wanted to tell him everything right there, but the words jammed in her throat. How could she say, I used to work for her? I knew what she did to you. So instead, she asked gently, and, what would you do, if things ever turned around? Ethan laughed, shaking his head. Turned around? Not sure I'd even recognize it. Then, after a pause, I guess I'd like to do something that mattered. Something that wasn't about money. Clara's eyes softened. Maybe you already are. He looked at her, really looked. Her eyes were the color of rain on glass. There was warmth there, but also sadness. What about you? He asked. You seem like someone who used to dream bigger than this place. She hesitated. Used to. That was true. I did, she said finally. But sometimes dreams get expensive. And life doesn't give refunds. Ethan smiled knowingly. Tell me about it. The plasma machine beeped. His session was nearly done. Clara removed the tubing carefully, pressing gauze to his arm. He flinched slightly, she could feel the heat of his skin beneath the gloves. Sorry, she murmured. It's fine. When she looked up, he was watching her. There was something unreadable in his eyes, not attraction exactly, but recognition. Like two people who'd both drowned once, meeting again on shore. Then, her computer pinged again. System alert, data transfer request, patient Ethan Cole flagged by legal affairs. Her stomach twisted. They know he's here. She snapped the monitor shut and unplugged the cable. Ethan frowned. Is something wrong? No, she said quickly, too quickly. Just routine maintenance. He gave her a long, searching look, then reached for his jacket. "Thanks, Nurse Clara." Her name on his lips made her chest ache. "Of course, Mr. Cole." As he turned to leave, she blurted, "Wait." He stopped. Are you doing okay? Outside of, this?" He shrugged, half smiling. "Let's just say I've gotten good at pretending." The honesty in his tone cracked her carefully built wall. She wanted to tell him everything, that his name was still whispered in the halls of his ex-wife's company, that he'd been scapegoated, that he'd never deserved any of it. But the words caught again. "So instead," she said softly, "you shouldn't have to." He met her gaze, tired, curious, but gentle. Something wordless passed between them. A promise, or maybe a question neither dared voice. Then he turned and left, the clinic door chiming behind him. Clara stood still, her hands trembling. When she turned back to the screen, the alert was gone, replaced by a system note. Patient record copied to Coltech Holdings/Executive Security Division. She swallowed hard. They knew he'd resurfaced. For the first time in years, fear gripped her again. But this time, it wasn't for herself. Outside, Ethan walked into the rain, stuffing the $100 cash into his pocket. He should have felt relief, groceries, maybe gas money. Instead, he just felt seen. And that scared him. He stopped under a streetlight, staring at his reflection in a puddle. Maybe, for the first time in months, he wasn't invisible. Do you believe some people are brought into our lives for a reason, even when it seems like the worst timing? Drop your thoughts below. He didn't know that across the city, a private email had just been sent from a clinic terminal. Subject, urgent, Ethan Cole found. And Clara Hayes, the nurse who couldn't stop shaking, had just become part of a story she thought she'd left behind. The next morning, Ethan woke up to the sound of rain against the window, steady, rhythmic, almost comforting. The studio apartment was small, one room, one window, and a cracked counter that leaned when he pressed against it. He'd stopped counting the days since he'd fallen from grace. Now he measured time in meals and quiet moments between job rejections. He poured instant coffee into a chipped mug and stared at his phone. No calls. No messages. No one from his old life ever reached out anymore. He'd deleted the last photos of Vivian months ago, but her voice still haunted the corners of his mind. "You'll thank me one day. You were always meant for smaller things." He clenched his jaw. Yesterday's encounter at the plasma clinic lingered with strange warmth, though. The nurse, Clara, had looked at him like she'd seen past everything, the failure, the shame, the labels. It unsettled him. People weren't supposed to care like that. He grabbed his jacket, heading out into the drizzle. He had another interview that afternoon, a warehouse job, night shift. He needed to keep moving. At the plasma clinic, Clara sat in the break room, staring at her untouched sandwich. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. She'd barely slept. The email she saw last night, the automatic alert sent to Coltech's executive servers, haunted her. She knew exactly what that meant. Vivian Cole knew Ethan had resurfaced. Clara's mind churned. Should she warn him? Should she tell him the truth, that she'd once worked under Vivian as part of the company's internal medical staff, and that she'd seen his name on the blacklist before the scandal broke? Her coworker Jenna nudged her. "You good, Clara? You look like you've seen a ghost." Clara forced a weak smile. "Just tired. Long night." Jenna shrugged. "Well, better caffeine than conscience, right?" Clara's smile faded. If only she knew. Ethan's interview went about as expected, polite rejections wrapped in corporate niceties. "We'll keep your resume on file," the hiring manager said, glancing once at his name before looking away. He walked out into the rain again, past a coffee shop window where two men in suits laughed over lattes. His reflection looked like a stranger, One who didn't belong in that world anymore. But underneath the fatigue, something flickered, curiosity. Why had Clara looked so shaken when she saw his name? That question refused to leave him alone. By evening, he found himself walking back toward the plasma center. Maybe he'd made up the tension. Maybe he just wanted to thank her for her kindness. When he arrived, the clinic was closing. The receptionist was stacking papers, the lobby lights dimmed. Then Clara emerged from the back room, her hair damp, jacket slung over her arm. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "Ethan," she said quietly. "You came back." He hesitated at the door. "Yeah. I wanted to check something. My account." She frowned slightly but nodded. "Sure. Come in." He followed her to the counter. She logged in, fingers hovering uncertainly over the keyboard. After a pause, she said, "You shouldn't be here tonight." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Her lips parted, then closed again. She couldn't tell him, not yet. "Not here. Just trust me," she said softly. "It's better if you don't come back for a while." "Why?" His tone sharpened. "Did I do something wrong?" "No. No, it's not that." She looked down, then back up, voice trembling. "You don't know the people who—" A loud buzz interrupted her. The clinic phone rang. Jenna called from across the hall, "Clara, line 2 for you, it's legal." Clara froze. Her stomach dropped. "Tell them I'll call back," she said, forcing calm into her voice. But Ethan had already read the fear in her eyes. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Clara. What's going on?" She swallowed hard. "You need to go. Please." He studied her for a long moment. There was no anger in his expression, just quiet hurt. "I don't know what you're mixed up in," he said finally, "but I've already lost everything once. If someone's coming after me again, I deserve to know." Her hand twitched at her side. She wanted to reach for him, to tell him everything, about Vivian, the corporate cover-up, the way they'd pinned financial misconduct on him to shield her father's firm. But fear sealed her lips. "Ethan," she whispered, "I can't say more." "Not yet." He nodded slowly, the muscles in his jaw tightening. "Right. Of course." He turned toward the door. "Wait," she started, but he didn't look back. When the glass door closed behind him, the sound felt final, like a heartbeat cut short. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She replayed the moment over and over, his confusion, his wounded calm, his eyes that had already known too much loss. By dawn, she made a decision. If she couldn't protect him from Vivian's reach, she'd warn him somehow, anonymously if she had to. She booted up her old encrypted laptop, one she hadn't touched since leaving Coltech. The password still worked. She typed a quick message into a hidden contact form. "To EC, unverified, they know where you are. Don't go back to the clinic. Don't trust anyone connected to Coltech." She hesitated before sending it, then hit enter. The message vanished into the ether. Across town, Ethan sat on his sagging couch, scrolling through his old inbox. The glow from the screen lit his tired face. Then a new message appeared. No sender. No signature. He read it twice. Then 3 times. They know where you are. His pulse quickened. He looked toward the rain-streaked window, heart pounding. Someone had found him. But who? And how did the nurse fit into it? Would you have trusted the anonymous warning, or gone straight to confront the person you suspected? Let me know what you'd do. Outside, in the parking lot beneath the flickering clinic sign, Clara stood in the rain, phone in hand, watching the streetlights blur. She whispered into the night, "I'm sorry, Ethan. I should have told you sooner." Somewhere across the city, Ethan whispered too, though his words were different. I knew it wasn't over. The following evening, the sky cracked open with a storm that turned the city's pulse electric. Seattle's rain wasn't falling anymore, it was crashing. Ethan's phone buzzed with another notification. A second anonymous message. You're not safe. Don't stay home tonight. He stared at the screen, torn between panic and disbelief. His life had already burned once, what more could they take from him? But something about the phrasing, urgent, familiar, made him think of her. Clara. He grabbed his jacket and left, the wind pushing hard against him. His feet led him, almost instinctively, toward the only place he'd seen kindness in months, the clinic. Inside, Clara was finishing paperwork under emergency lighting. The storm had knocked out half the city's grid. The clinic was supposed to close hours ago, but 2 donors were still inside when the power failed, forcing them into lockdown until biohazard procedures cleared. She rubbed her temples, exhaustion mixing with anxiety. When the door buzzer sounded, she jumped. No one was supposed to be entering now. Through the glass, she saw Ethan, drenched, pale, eyes searching. Her heart sank and soared at once. She rushed to the entrance. You shouldn't be here, she said the moment the door slid open. I got your message. Clara froze. You. I recognize the phrasing, he said softly. You used the same words you did yesterday, don't trust anyone connected to Coltech. You worked there, didn't you? Thunder rolled through the building. She looked away, voice trembling. I did. A long time ago. He stepped closer. Then tell me the truth. What do they want? I can't. Yes, you can. The emergency lights flickered red across his face, haunted, determined, desperate. Clara closed her eyes. If I tell you, you'll hate me. Try me. A crash of thunder made them both flinch. Somewhere in the clinic, a power breaker snapped, plunging half the hall into shadow. The security system automatically sealed the exits. The sound of steel locks echoed through the empty building. Clara cursed under her breath. We're locked in until the storm passes. Safety protocol. Ethan exhaled. Great. Guess the universe really wants us to talk. They sat in the break room, 2 steaming cups of vending machine coffee between them. The hum of the generator filled the silence. Finally, Clara spoke. I was part of Coltech's medical research team. I wasn't high up, just a nurse attached to the wellness program for executives and investors. Ethan watched her carefully. So you knew Vivian? She nodded, eyes downcast. She was complicated. Brilliant, but cruel. When she started preparing for the divorce, she made it clear that she wanted every trace of you erased from the company. She said you were a liability. Ethan leaned back, the bitterness rising. She always hated loose ends. She didn't just hate you, Ethan, Clara said quietly. She feared you. He frowned. Feared me? Your name was blacklisted months before the scandal broke. There was an internal memo, contain EC, discredit if necessary. They wanted to ruin your reputation before you could expose something. He stared at her. Expose what? Her voice dropped. The data breach. The one tied to investor insurance fraud. You were the only one who could trace it to her father's firm. They made sure you never got the chance. The room went silent except for the distant crack of thunder. Ethan's hands clenched around the paper cup until it crumpled. So it wasn't incompetence. It was sabotage. I tried to warn compliance, she whispered. But HR flagged my report and deleted it. A week later, they reassigned me. I left the company. Ethan laughed bitterly. And now you're drawing blood for people trying to survive. Guess we both downgraded. She flinched. Instantly, his tone softened. I didn't mean that the way it sounded. She nodded, but the hurt had already flashed through her eyes. The silence stretched again, heavier this time. Finally, she said, you should know, when your name came up on the clinic system, it was already flagged. Someone in legal wanted to be notified the moment you resurfaced. Ethan stared at the floor, his voice rough. So they're still watching me? Yes. He exhaled slowly, shaking his head. Of course they are. He stood, pacing. You should have told me. I wanted to. I just. Were you scared of them, or of me? Her eyes met his. Both. Lightning flashed through the windows, painting their faces in white fire. Do you know what it's like, Ethan said quietly, to lose everything because of a lie, and then find out the truth was sitting across from you the whole time? Clara's eyes welled. Do you know what it's like to watch it happen and not be brave enough to stop it? Their words hung in the air, sharp as broken glass. Then, silence. And in that silence, something cracked open. Not forgiveness yet. But understanding. The power flickered again, plunging the room into soft, red emergency glow. The rain outside softened to a whisper. Ethan finally sat back down. So what now? Clara swallowed. Now we wait for morning. And then you disappear again. Before they can reach you. He stared at her for a long moment. You'd really help me do that? She nodded. It's the least I can do. He leaned forward slightly. Why? You don't owe me anything. Her lips trembled. Maybe I need to believe I can still do something right. He studied her, the tension between them shifting, deepening. You already did. For a long while, neither spoke. The only sound was rain easing against glass. And in that fragile quiet, something undeniable bloomed between them, pain mixed with grace. Two broken lives recognizing themselves in each other. As dawn crept through the storm clouds, Ethan whispered, Clara, when this is over, promise me something. What? Don't hide from your life just because you're trying to fix mine. Her eyes softened. Only if you promise to stop giving yours away in pieces. He smiled, faint but real. Deal. By the time the power returned and the doors unlocked, both of them had changed. Ethan walked out into the misty morning feeling lighter and heavier at once. Clara watched him leave, hand pressed to the window. Neither knew it yet, but the real storm was only beginning. The morning after the storm, the air felt fragile, like the city itself was holding its breath. Ethan woke to sunlight streaking across his small apartment, the first real light in days. He should have felt relief, but something about the night before clung to him. Clara's voice still echoed in his head, you should disappear again. He wasn't sure he could. Not now. Not after what she'd said, and not with the truth finally clawing at the edges of his mind. He needed answers. By noon, he was sitting in a corner booth of a downtown library, a relic from his old life, a place he used to come for strategy meetings, now a refuge for questions no one wanted to answer. He'd logged into an old encrypted account he'd once used for Coltech projects. It hadn't been touched in years, but he still remembered the password. After an hour of digging, he found it, a buried internal memo marked MED clearance request/E, :termination notice. The attached signature made his stomach drop. C. Hayes. Clara. He leaned back in the booth, the world blurring around him. His pulse pounded in his ears. It wasn't just that she'd worked for Coltech, she'd been the one who authorized the medical clearance Vivian used to prove he was unfit for executive reinstatement after the scandal. She had unknowingly, or maybe knowingly, helped Vivian erase him. He shut the laptop, breath uneven. For a moment, he wanted to believe it was a mistake. That she hadn't known what she was signing. But the dates matched. The timing was perfect. The night before he'd been publicly discredited, her clearance note had gone through. And now she'd stood in front of him, trembling, saying, "You'd hate me if you knew." He understood what she meant. That evening, Clara arrived home to find an envelope taped to her door. Her heart sank as soon as she saw his handwriting. Inside was a single folded page, no greeting, no goodbye, just words that cut like glass. "You said you couldn't tell me everything. Now I know why. You didn't just work for them. You helped them bury me." Her vision blurred. She pressed a hand to her mouth, choking back a sob. He knew. And the worst part, he wasn't wrong. 3 years ago, she'd been working in the wellness division at Coltech. She'd been new, eager to prove herself. Vivian had requested a medical review for her husband, claiming erratic behavior, emotional instability. It was framed as routine. Clara had been instructed to sign off the clearance, confirm the results from another department, and file it. She hadn't realized the test results were falsified until it was too late. When she discovered the truth, she'd gone to her supervisor. But by then, the divorce was finalized, the press releases written, and Ethan Cole's reputation shredded. She'd spent months afterward trying to expose it. When she refused to retract her internal complaint, she was fired under a non-disclosure clause. She'd never stopped carrying the guilt. And now he knew. Clara didn't sleep that night. By dawn, she was back at the clinic, the world outside washed pale by fog. When Ethan walked in, her breath caught. He looked exhausted, rain-soaked, but steady. He handed her a folded printout, the memo with her signature. "Tell me it isn't what it looks like." His voice was quiet, but the tremor beneath it was pure pain. Clara swallowed hard. "I didn't know, Ethan. I swear I didn't know what she was doing with that report." "You signed it," he said, eyes blazing. "That clearance is what she used to prove I was unstable. That's what cost me everything." Tears welled, but she didn't look away. "I know. And I've hated myself for it every day since." Ethan turned from her, pacing. "You could have told me last night. I tried. I just didn't want to ruin your new life." Her voice broke. "No. I didn't want to see what that look on your face would do to me." He stopped, breathing hard. The air between them crackled, grief, betrayal, love, all colliding. "You think saying you didn't know makes it better," he whispered. "No. But it's the truth." She stepped closer. "You were the first man I ever admired at that company. You fought for people who didn't have power. That's why I couldn't stay after what they did. That's why I became a nurse here, to try and make something right, even if I couldn't fix what I broke." Ethan stared at her, jaw tight. "Vivian told me once," Clara continued, voice trembling, "some people aren't meant to win. She said it after she ruined you. And I just stood there, silent." The memory made her shake. "I'll never forgive myself for that." Ethan's voice softened, ragged. "And you think I should forgive you?" "No," she said quietly. "I think you should hate me. But I also think you should know I never stopped trying to make it right." Lightning flickered faintly outside, echoing the tension in the air. Finally, Ethan exhaled, a slow, shaky release of years of hurt. "I don't know what to feel anymore. You don't have to decide tonight." He looked at her, and for the first time, there was something new in his eyes. Not forgiveness, but understanding. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the $100 bill from his last plasma donation. He pressed it onto the counter between them. "Use it for someone who actually deserves saving," he said quietly. Then he turned and walked out. Clara stood frozen, tears streaming silently. Outside, he disappeared into the mist. That night, Clara wrote him one last message. "I can't undo what I did. But if you ever want the truth, all of it, meet me tomorrow night at Pier 42. Bring nothing but your heart. See. She hit send and stared at the screen until it dimmed. Somewhere out in the rain, Ethan read the message and closed his eyes. He didn't know if he could forgive her. But something in him whispered, go. The pier was almost empty, only the gulls and the wind keeping vigil. Seattle's water lay black beneath a bruised purple sky, neon reflections trembling across the surface. Clara stood near the rail, hair whipping across her face, the cold biting her fingers. She'd been there nearly an hour, waiting, rehearsing words that refused to come. When footsteps finally echoed down the planks, she didn't have to turn to know it was him. Something in the air shifted, a heaviness that was equal parts hurt and hope. Ethan stopped a few paces away. You still came, he said. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. He stepped closer. You said you'd tell me everything. She nodded, gripping the rail. I owe you that. He waited, eyes fixed on the horizon. I told you I didn't know what Vivian was doing with that medical report, Clara began, voice unsteady. That was true. But what I didn't tell you was that I knew her long before I worked at Coltech. Ethan frowned. How? My sister was her personal assistant. When the divorce started, Vivian came to me in panic, said you were unraveling, that she needed proof you were unstable so she could protect the company. I believed her. She swallowed hard. I thought I was helping someone scared, not destroying someone honest. Ethan's jaw tightened. Your sister. She killed herself a month after the scandal, Clara whispered. Vivian cut her off, blamed her for leaks that weren't hers. That's when I learned what kind of monster she was. That's when I tried to undo it. He stared at her, stunned. You lost someone because of her, too. Clara nodded. And every time I saw your face in the news, I saw my own guilt. The wind howled between them. Ethan turned away, hands gripping the railing until his knuckles went white. Why didn't you tell me that before? Because I didn't think you'd care about my pain when you were drowning in yours. He laughed bitterly. You really think pain's a competition? She took a step closer. No. But I think forgiveness is. He faced her then, eyes wet with anger and something else. You think I can just forgive and forget because you're sorry? No, she said, tears slipping down her cheeks. I don't expect forgiveness. I just need you to know that the person who helped destroy you is the same person who's been trying to save what's left. Thunder rolled far off over the sound. For a long, unbearable minute, neither moved. Then Ethan's voice broke. I don't know what to do with you, Clara. You're the reason I fell, and the only person who makes me want to stand again. Her breath hitched. Then don't do anything. Just feel it. He shook his head, stepping toward her until they were inches apart. You think it's that easy? You think you can just... She cut him off, voice trembling. I don't think anything's easy anymore. I just know that when you walked out of that clinic, it felt like losing the last good thing I had. The words hung between them, raw and bare. Ethan's anger cracked. He looked at her, really looked, the way he had in the clinic, as if seeing the outline of himself reflected back. He reached up, brushing a strand of wet hair from her cheek. She didn't flinch. You still believe in people, even after what they did to you, he murmured. That's not weakness, Clara. That's impossible strength. Her lip trembled. Don't make me stronger than I am. Then don't make me angrier than I am, he whispered. She gave a shaky laugh, half sobbing. You're impossible. So are you. The rain started again, light and cold, speckling their faces. Neither moved. Finally, she whispered, say something real, Ethan. He hesitated, then said the truest thing he'd said in years. I'm tired of hating everything that hurt me. Especially you. Before she could answer, he leaned forward and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was grief and fury and forgiveness tangled together, 2 years of silence crashing into one desperate moment. She gasped against his mouth, hands gripping his coat as if anchoring herself. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. The storm had quieted around them, replaced by the sound of the waves slapping against wood. Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know if this is right," he whispered. "Maybe it doesn't have to be right," she replied. "Maybe it just has to be real." He let out a shaky laugh. "You're going to ruin my plans for quiet self-pity." She smiled through tears. "Good. Self-pity doesn't look good on you." They stood there, the city lights flickering like tiny stars behind them, the world smaller than the space between their hands. For a few stolen minutes, the past didn't matter. The betrayal, the lies, the scars, they existed, but softer now, blurred by the rain. When the ferry horn echoed across the bay, Ethan finally spoke. "If they're still watching me, you could get hurt." "I've already been hurt," she said simply. "At least this time it's for something that matters." He touched her cheek again, thumb tracing the line of a tear. "I don't deserve this." "Maybe not," she whispered. "But you deserve peace." He kissed her again, slower this time, the kind that feels like a promise rather than an escape. When they parted, the first hint of dawn painted the horizon silver. Clara smiled faintly. "Guess the rain finally stopped." "Yeah," Ethan said softly. "Maybe it's our turn." They walked off the pier together, hand in hand, uncertain but no longer alone. Neither noticed the black sedan parked across the street, engine idling, a camera lens glinting through the window. Because every calm, they say, hides another storm. Morning sunlight spilled through Ethan's apartment window, cutting across the small kitchen table where 2 mugs of untouched coffee sat cooling. Clara was leaning against the counter, barefoot, wrapped in his old flannel shirt, the one thing he'd kept from his past life. She looked out of place and perfect at the same time, her hair messy from sleep, her smile shy but certain. Ethan stood beside the stove, pretending to read the newspaper but really just watching her. "Do you ever think," she said softly, "about starting over somewhere no one knows your name?" "All the time," he replied. "But the world has a way of remembering you when you least want it to." She crossed the room, slid her hands around his waist, rested her head against his chest. "Then let it remember this version of you." He kissed the top of her head, closing his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of his own body lift. Outside, the city hummed awake. Inside, for a few stolen hours, everything was quiet. By noon, Ethan walked her to her car. "You sure you don't want me to drive you?" She laughed, tossing her keys. "I'm not made of glass." He smiled, that rare, easy grin that made her heart stutter. "Call me when you get home." She nodded, started the engine, and drove off. Ethan stood there watching until her car disappeared. It was a good day. Too good. Almost unnaturally so. That evening, when he returned to his apartment, his door was slightly ajar. His chest tightened. He pushed it open slowly. The place wasn't ransacked, just touched. As if someone had walked through, looking, remembering. On the counter sat a glass of wine, half full, and beside it, a woman's silk glove. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. "Hello, Ethan." Vivian's voice, smooth as ice melting in whiskey. He turned. She stood near the window, dressed in black, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "I should have changed the locks," he said quietly. "You did. You just never changed your habits." He crossed his arms. "What do you want, Vivian?" She smiled faintly. "You're trending again." She tossed a folded newspaper on the counter. The headline hit like a fist. Disgraced CEO's secret affair with former Coltech whistleblower. Sources claim the two are conspiring to reopen old allegations. Ethan's stomach dropped. A grainy photo of him and Clara at the pier filled the page, her hand on his face, rain blurring around them. Where did you? Please, she interrupted. You forget who still owns the press. He slammed his hand on the counter. You had me followed. You made it easy. You always did. Ethan's breath came fast. You think I care what the tabloids say now? You already took everything. Vivian's gaze hardened. You have something left, her. He froze. Clara Hayes. Sweet little nurse with a conscience. You think I didn't know? His voice dropped, deadly. Leave her out of this. Oh, I intend to, she said, swirling her wine. But she's already ruined herself. She signed another clearance this morning, an illegal access to Coltech's old archives. You see, your girlfriend's been digging. He stepped closer. You're lying. She smiled. You always did underestimate women, Ethan. That's why you lost me. And it's why you'll lose her. When Clara's phone buzzed that evening, she was still at the clinic. It was a message from an unknown number. Meet me where the truth began. 8 p.m. She assumed it was Ethan. It wasn't. The rain came back that night, harder than before. Ethan found her car outside the abandoned Coltech tower, headlights still on. He rushed inside, heart hammering. Clara, he called. His voice echoed through the empty marble lobby. Upstairs, in the old executive boardroom, he found her. She was standing by the glass wall, pale, eyes rimmed with tears. And beside her, Vivian. Well, Vivian said, smiling thinly, the family's all here. Ethan's fists clenched. You dragged her into this? Clara shook her head quickly. I didn't know she'd be here, I thought it was you. Vivian stepped forward, circling them like a predator. She came to expose me. She thought reopening the case would clear your name. How noble. Clara's voice trembled. You destroyed 2 lives, Vivian. Isn't that enough? On the contrary, Vivian said coolly. You both destroyed yourselves. I just signed the paperwork. Ethan's voice was low, dangerous. Say what you came to say and leave. Vivian's expression softened for a fleeting second. You think this little romance redeems you? It doesn't. You'll always be the man who fell from grace. And she'll always be the woman who helped push you. Clara flinched. Vivian turned, walking toward the door. I'll let the press have the rest. They do love a tragedy. When she was gone, silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. Ethan turned to Clara. You went back to the archives? I was trying to find proof that Vivian doctored the reports, something that could clear you, she said quickly. I didn't know she'd still have eyes everywhere. Now they'll think we're conspiring together, he muttered. You've just given her the one thing she wanted, proof I haven't let go. Clara stepped closer. I was trying to help you. He looked at her, pain twisting his face. Help me? Clara, you don't understand. Every time someone says they're helping me, I end up losing more. Her voice cracked. So what are you saying? I'm saying maybe Vivian's right. The words hit her like a slap. You don't mean that. He turned away, voice cold. Maybe you and I were just another mistake waiting to happen. Tears streamed down her face. You don't get to erase what happened between us. I have to, he said quietly. Before she erases you too. He walked past her, leaving her standing in the rain leaking through the broken windows. Clara sank to the floor, shaking, her sobs echoing through the hollow building. Outside, thunder rolled across the skyline, the sound of everything breaking. The night after the confrontation, the city slept under a curtain of fog. Ethan sat in his truck on the edge of the bay, the same pier where he and Clara had kissed only 2 nights earlier. The rain had stopped, but the water was restless, waves slapping against the wooden pylons like an argument that wouldn't end. He hadn't been able to go home. Not really. The place still smelled like her shampoo and the ghost of laughter that didn't belong to a man like him. He gripped the steering wheel, staring at the small velvet box he'd taken from a drawer before he left the apartment. Inside lay the wedding band he'd once worn, gold dulled by years of bitterness. He'd kept it as a reminder of what betrayal cost. Now it just felt like dead weight. He rolled the ring between his fingers and whispered, "What if she's right? What if I really am just the man who fell?" Across town, Clara sat on the floor of her tiny apartment, surrounded by stacks of files she'd stolen from Kolteka's archive. The papers blurred through her tears. The truth was all there: falsified signatures, altered test results, the trail leading straight back to Vivian. It was everything Ethan needed to clear his name. But would he even want it now? Her phone buzzed. A new email notification. From Vivian Cole. Subject, a final word. Clara hesitated before opening it. "You think the truth will save him? It won't. Men like Ethan only know how to love when it destroys them. I taught him that. So did you." Clara deleted the message, hands shaking. She pulled out her phone again, Ethan's number already on the screen. Her thumb hovered over the call button. She could tell him everything. She could clear his name. Or she could let him go, so he'd never be pulled into the fire again. "Which one is mercy?" she whispered. At dawn, Ethan drove to the ocean cliffs just outside the city, a place he used to go when he still believed in miracles. He watched the horizon fade from gray to gold. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about revenge or redemption. Just her. He could still feel the tremble in her hands, the warmth of her breath when she'd said, "Maybe it just has to be real." He reached into his jacket pocket and found a crumpled note, one Clara had left on his table the morning before. "If you ever decide to forgive yourself, I'll be waiting, wherever peace finds you." The words hit harder than any accusation. He took the ring, the one that had belonged to another life, and dropped it into the sea. It vanished without a sound. For a long time, he stood there, empty-handed, the wind tugging at his coat. Then he whispered, "Maybe I can forgive her. But I have to start with forgiving me." That evening, Clara returned to the clinic for a late shift. The nurse at reception handed her an envelope. "Guy came by earlier. Said you'd know what to do with it." Inside was a cashier's check for $100,000 and a handwritten note. "For every drop of blood I sold to survive, someone else gets to live. Start a fund in your sister's name. E." Tears filled her eyes. It wasn't a goodbye, it was his way of setting both of them free. She folded the note carefully and pressed it to her heart. Outside the window, the streetlights flickered to life, one by one, like quiet promises. That same moment, Ethan boarded a northbound train. No destination, just movement, a chance to breathe. As the city blurred past, he took out his phone. He hadn't opened her last message since the night of the storm. He did now. "If you ever want the truth, all of it, meet me tomorrow night at Pier 42. Bring nothing but your heart." He smiled faintly. "Guess I was late." He typed a new message, paused, deleted it. Then, finally, he sent just 3 words. "I'm still here." The train sped into the dark, the city shrinking behind him. Hours later, Clara's phone lit up. She saw his message and pressed her palm to the screen, whispering through tears, "Then so am I." For the first time in years, she felt something lift inside her, a weight she'd been carrying alone. She went back to her desk, opened the folder of evidence, and began drafting a letter to the state regulators. If she couldn't save him with love, she'd save him with truth. Outside, rain began to fall again, soft, cleansing, different this time. Two people under the same sky, miles apart, both making the same impossible choice, to keep believing in something that might still find its way back. The camera of life would pull back now, showing Ethan's train cutting through the fog, Clara's clinic window glowing like a candle in the night. Neither knew it yet, but their paths were already bending toward one another. Because love, once it's real, never disappears. It just waits. 2 weeks later, the sky above Seattle was the color of forgiveness, gray, soft, open. The world had moved on. But Ethan hadn't. He was sitting in a small diner just off the coast highway, a half-empty cup of coffee in front of him, when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, until he saw the subject line. Coltech scandal, official review reopened. He opened the attached link. There it was, front page on every business feed. Whistleblower nurse submits evidence exposing CEO's corruption and document falsification. And under it, a photo of Clara, her eyes steady, her chin lifted, the truth finally in her voice. He read the byline again and again, hands trembling. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Across town, Clara sat in her small apartment, watching the same headline on TV. Her phone was exploding with messages, reporters, lawyers, even regulators. But all she could do was sit there, numb, watching the screen as Vivian Cole's perfect empire began to crumble. Coltech's stock was already plummeting. News anchors were calling it one of the most brazen acts of corporate sabotage and fraud in recent memory. Vivian had been served an official summons that morning. Justice. At last. But instead of celebrating, Clara just whispered, "I hope he sees it." He did. Ethan stood and left the diner without finishing his coffee. He didn't know where he was going, only that his heart was pulling him faster than his mind could argue. By the time he reached the city, the sun was breaking through the clouds. He parked by the pier, their pier, and saw her standing there exactly as before, hair tousled by the wind, eyes full of every word they'd never said. She turned when she heard his footsteps. For a moment, they just stared, the air between them thick with everything that had been lost and found again. "You did it," he said finally. Clara shook her head. "We did it. You're free now." He laughed softly. "Freedom's overrated. I'd trade it all for what's standing in front of me." Her lip trembled. "Ethan." He stepped closer, eyes searching hers. "You fought for me when I stopped fighting for myself. You risked everything, your career, your name. Why?" She swallowed hard. "Because you were worth saving." He closed the gap between them, voice breaking. "You still think that?" "I know it." He reached up, brushing away the tear that slid down her cheek. "I should have believed you sooner. I should have believed in us." She smiled through tears. "Then believe it now." He kissed her, not desperate this time, but whole, like two people finally breathing after years underwater. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "What happens now?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Now? We rebuild." 2 months later, Coltech was under full investigation. Vivian's assets had been frozen, her board of directors replaced. Publicly, Ethan declined any settlement. Instead, he used his reclaimed reputation to start something new, Hayes Cole Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to medical ethics and fair corporate reform. Clara stood beside him at the press conference, her hand quietly laced in his behind the podium. Reporters shouted questions, about the scandal, about their relationship, about what came next. Ethan simply said, "Sometimes life takes everything from you so it can give you back what actually matters." He looked at Clara. "For me, that's love and truth. The rest is noise." The cameras flashed like stars. That evening, they returned to the clinic, the place where it had all started. It was closing time, the halls dim, machines humming softly. Ethan looked around and smiled. You ever think about how strange it is? I came here just to sell blood, and somehow, I found life. Clara squeezed his hand. Sometimes miracles look like mistakes at first. They walked to the plasma room. The cot where he'd once sat was still there, same faded blue fabric. He set a small plaque on the wall beside it. The beginning of better things. She touched the plaque, tears shining in her eyes. You really think it was better? He nodded. Every step. Even the ones that hurt. They stood there in silence, the kind that doesn't need words. Later, as they walked along the waterfront, Ethan stopped suddenly and looked out over the water. The sun was setting, streaking gold across the waves. I used to think redemption was about erasing the past, he said quietly. Now I think it's about loving someone enough to face it. Clara smiled. Then I guess we're both redeemed. He turned to her, his voice soft but sure. You know, when you first said I looked pale that day, I thought it was judgment. But now I think maybe, you were seeing through me. She laughed lightly. I was a nurse, remember? Yeah, he said, smiling. You still are. You just happen to be my cure too. The waves whispered against the rocks, the city lights coming alive behind them. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, and for the first time in forever, Ethan felt the quiet peace of a man who had finally come home. They watched the last light fade, fingers intertwined, and it felt like the whole world had exhaled. Months later, a letter arrived at the clinic, no sender, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photo, the old Coltech building being demolished. On the back, in Ethan's handwriting, were just 5 words. For us, and for her. Clara smiled, folded the note, and pinned it to her bulletin board. Outside, rain began to fall again, not a storm this time, but something softer, cleaner. Every drop felt like a heartbeat. Every heartbeat, a promise. Sometimes love doesn't show up to rescue you, it shows up to rebuild you. Ethan lost everything, and somehow found the one heart strong enough to stand with him in the ruins. Maybe that's what real love is, not perfection, but forgiveness that refuses to quit. Now it's your turn, would you have trusted again after being broken like that? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who still believes in second chances. Red Heart. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.